The war never ends for some of our soldiers returning home. For some, the war rages on, emotionally, physically, and mentally. And if the internal, very private combat escalates, the war comes alive once again on the home front, and this time involves local police. Hello, my name is Mike Masterson, and I'm the police chief in Boise, Idaho. On July 28, 2009 at 22:50 hours, about 11 p.m., Boise police officers responded to a citizen's emergency 911 call of a man standing outside her apartment door armed with a machine gun. What you are about to hear from the 911 tape is the beginning of my department's deadly force encounter with a decorated Army vet who we would later discover was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. Following that will be a lessons learned from this experience. This man was on a mission to find his dog.
911, do you need police, fire, or paramedics?
I need the police. There's some guy with a gun on my door trying and pounding on it.
And did you hear the gun go off?
That was it again. And he's still at my door.
Dispatch from 10, what do you got?
Calling party advised there was a white male at her door with what appeared to be a machine gun. He was pounding on her door. She heard 2 shots.
Officers arrived in the vicinity and began searching for the exact location.
Just heard another shot.
Please,
over the
got
phone.
shots fired, not officer related, suspect related.
They heard 2 more shots which directed them to the nearby apartment building. As officers came around a corner, they observed the suspect standing at the top of the stairs, pointing a gun with a flashlight at them. Multiple officers shouted commands to put the gun down. The suspect darted in and out of the doorway of a nearby apartment where he had previously kicked the door in. He returned to the top of the stairs where he once again pointed his weapon in the direction of the officers standing below.
Shots fired.
4 officers fired a total of 14 shots as the suspect sought cover and ducked back into the apartment. Officers yelled more verbal challenges, and the suspect responded by talking with officers. He would holster his pistol, he slung his rifle over his shoulder, placed his hands high in the air, and walked down the stairs to the officer's location where he was taken into custody.
Dispatch 1 in custody.
Copy, 1 in custody, 2332.
The suspect's name is George Nickel. He survived. His police and military training contributed to his survival. We would later learn that on February 8, 2007, Staff Sergeant George Nickel was the lone survivor from the explosion of one of the largest IEDs ever placed outside of Karma, Iraq. The blast penetrated the armored hull, and Sergeant Nickel's 12-ton bomb-resistant vehicle was blown more than 10 feet in the air. It was and has been the deadliest attack on Idaho soldiers in the war. 3 of his colleagues died. We had the opportunity to interview Sergeant Nickel and learn more about what this decorated veteran was thinking, seeing, and hearing on that near-fateful, tragic night in July of 2009 when officers nearly ended his life. We bring you that remarkable account, followed by a briefing by Boise Police Sergeant David Cavanaugh, in the hopes the lessons we've learned from that night may be useful for other police officers and crisis intervention teams who, all too often, are called to deal with individuals suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder.
You're in your military, that's your job. I mean, that's what you train for, that's all your function is. So I knew from the get-go it would be Iraq. It would be to go out and hunt for and dispose of IEDs. So worked a few months in Ramadi, and then things were heating up in Fallujah, so they moved my platoon to support or take up more of the workload in Fallujah. So we got moved out to Fallujah. We're doing route clearance out there, and what brought us to the point where I got injured was we were out doing a route clearance mission. Got a call saying return to Camp Fallujah, which was odd for us because once you're committed to clearing the route, you're committed. So we go back, and what we found out was a Marine CH-46 helicopter got shot down. So they wanted us to clear the route because we were familiar with the area, to clear a route so that the graves registration unit can get in and get the bodies out. And it's quite a process because, you know, we had like 7 vehicles in our package, and then you had security vehicles online with that, and, you know, the support vehicles for the graves registration. So it's quite a convoy heading out there. Found quite a few IEDs on the way out. A couple of them detonated on us, but I mean, that was for some, you know, an IED detonating on their vehicle was a big event, but with frequency, it becomes commonplace. So as long as your vehicle is still rolling and everybody's okay, then that's it. It's like, okay, we're good. So got out to the crash scene. Graves registration got the bodies out. And then so we cleared the route back out, because even though you might clear a route, if no one has eyes on that route for the past half hour, it's no longer clear. I mean, they just set up IEDs so quickly. And what we didn't know at the time is they had actually come through, planted some very sizable IEDs, and then actually paved over them. So you couldn't even tell where they were at. We're going out the next day to actually recover the helicopter itself. Got them right back onto that one route in. Now, from what I've been told, because I was the point vehicle, I was rounding a bend, so they kind of lost sight of my truck. And the terrain in that area, just north of Fallujah, you have canals, and in that area there was really high reeds. I mean, like 8-10 foot high reeds. So they lost sight as I rounded a bend. And they said the next thing, my truck was in the air, landed on its side. They came up. My passenger, Sergeant Hold'em, and my gunner, PFC Werner, they were killed instantly in the blast. They pulled me out, and my driver, Sergeant Clevenger, medics treated us there on site. They moved us back to one of the combat outposts to get a medevac chopper in. Sergeant Clevenger died en route back to Fallujah. They stabilized me in surgery there, and within a couple days I was in Balad, which is near Baghdad, and from there to Longstuhl, Germany, and then to Walter Reed. I had a fracture of the tibia and fibia of my right ankle, compound fracture of the tibia fibia right below my right knee, 2 broken ribs, a broken shoulder blade, broken cheekbone, and a moderate brain injury. So I was inpatient in the orthopedic ward there at Walter Reed. I mean, because my first memory, they actually had my leg. They screw pins into your femur and into your tib, and they run wires between them to hold everything in place, and that's just to stabilize it. Then eventually they went in and they put a steel rod the whole length of the tibia, and there's a plate on each side of the ankle, and probably about 17 screws all holding it together. I'd never even found out what exactly happened until weeks later, when a friend of mine who was still in Iraq actually managed to track me down in Walter Reed. Because through this whole evac process for a short while there, because when you get evac, they don't keep your unit informed of where you end up. So really, you know, I got sent off, and my unit really didn't have a clue where I was at here in the States. So eventually it tracked me down, and he gave me a call from Iraq, and he actually told me everything that happened that day. A lot of it was disbelief. Definitely, you know, very detached from everything. Wasn't really processing stuff mentally at that time. Oh, well, there's, yeah, you just seem numb to everything. I mean, it seems like very surrealistic. You know, you go from one day of being in Iraq with all your buddies to the next day you're in the hospital, and, you know, because of the brain injury, I wasn't really cognitively processing anything that quick anyway. Attention span was non-existent. And even to this day, you know, still chronic insomnia. You ever feel quite, I mean, it's a matter of being frustrated because you can't think right, you can't focus on anything. And my main concerns at the time were the continuation of my military service. So I spent 6 months here on the medical hold before I was deemed fit for duty. And even then, I'm on a permanent profile, militarily wise, no running. So I got done with that, actually received my active duty discharge, which put me back in reserve status. Went back to work for the prison. And at the time, even going back to work, there was still a sense of, you know, not finishing what I'd started over there. So, you know, basically there was no closure to the whole thing. And that's when I, you know, as soon as I got that fit for duty report, you know, I started looking for units to go back with. Did find a unit that was deploying, that was willing to take me on. So at the time was married. My wife was in the military, and she was getting ready to be deployed with her unit. So it was actually at the time, okay, you're going to deploy, well, I'll deploy. And so we packed up the house, put everything in storage. Had all the paperwork in line to get transferred to this other unit. And the way it works in the military, if you want to transfer units, you know, they have to accept you, and your unit has to release you. So everything looked in order. Packed up the house, got my wife moved down to Texas to be deployed with her unit. And I was actually staying up here on Gowan Field. And well, normal Army bureaucracy, there was a lot of, oh, well, okay, we need to do this paperwork or this paperwork. So it was just going through, you know, those things, which is normal. So I actually spent close to 3 months sitting there as they were, okay, we're ready. No, you're not. Okay, pack your bags. You're leaving in a couple of days. Nope, there's a problem with this part of your chain of command. And after three and a half months, it was not the unit gaining me, but my unit, higher command, because the way the reserves is set up, even though our unit here, our higher command out in Chicago. So basically, after 3.5 months, they came back and said, no, we're not releasing you. And so that alone was, you know, at the time pretty devastating, but also just to, you know, put salt in the wound is, it was really no reason why. So pretty much the final word was, you're not going, quit asking. Even pretty angry. Well, so there I sit, you know. Everything that was my life is in storage, and really don't have a place to live anymore. And well, at that time, even like the problems I was experiencing with dealing everything mentally, it's a whole attitude of, well, you just suck it up, and go on, and of course you don't admit to anything, because everybody I knew that admitted to having any problems, it was just an instant, oh, you're discharged. And at the time, that was just like a main focus was, you know, had this weird notion that, you know, if I could just redeploy, it would fix everything. So not being able to do that, it was pretty much well, you won't let me do that, and then screw everything type of attitude. And what got me to the point was just started drinking every day and quit going to work. Didn't feel comfortable going out in public. It was then I was really come to a realization that physically I couldn't keep up with the demands of what I was doing before deployment, as far as military and the work at the prison. And even like coming back on manhole, I mean, it's just little things that raises your anxiety level. Like, well, like over there in Iraq, you're going out looking for bombs, and so you're looking for certain signs and indications on the roadside of anything, and it's amazing how much you bring that back with you. And you know, you might drive down the road, and there might be a scrap of tire laying there on the side of the road that, oh, you just think it's a piece of garbage. Well, that's a red flag for a threat indicator. So it's just, you know, it's just a constant state of like tension, because your brain is still telling you that that's a threat. And you know what the big killer at the time for myself and a lot of the guys that I know that suffer with a lot of things I do is your tendency to isolate yourself is pretty detrimental to everything, because you just sit and dwell on everything you've been through and how it's affected your life. And at the time, you know, coming more to that realization that physically I couldn't keep up with everything I used to do, and much more dependent mentally on helper aides, I guess you could say. Even now, I mean, I function pretty good, but you know, I'm solely dependent on memory aids to keep everything in line. And even now, I could put something away and it's gone. It's forgotten. And okay, so that night was actually earlier that afternoon. Got a call from my military unit, so we had drilled that coming weekend. To remind me, there was a bunch of, because the reserves, you do a lot of, you got to do like yearly qualifications on certain tasks, and it's internet based, so it's sitting at a computer and doing some really dry material. And so looking at, you know, now having to do those things on the computer and knowing what was coming down as far as my future in the military, because it was really coming down to, you know, well, 16 years vested, and that's pretty much it. 12 years with the prison, so, you know, so that was that was my whole identity. I mean, I've been in uniform service since 18 years old, and, you know, that's who I was. So that was a pretty big blow to my self-conscious. And so that day, you know, I was really angry, because it was really sinking into that mindset of, well, why even bother doing these little courses online if I'm not even going to be in here in a few months? I know I hadn't slept for 3 days, so I figured, well, I'm going to sleep, and the quickest way I know to do that is just go out and get a case of beer, and it'll make me sleep. I'm not sure how it moved from there to the actual physical part of going out and shooting doors, and I do know in memory you know, I got a small dog, and my brain was telling me at that time that someone had taken him, and so that registered as a threat in my head. And so yeah, I put my vest on and got my rifle, and I don't know, it comes back to that I don't know where I made the jump from the dog missing to, you know, arming up and putting my gear on, but I can say that, I mean, that was, you know, you identify what your mission is, and okay, well, we're going to accomplish the mission, and these are my normal tools I have to make that happen.
And then what did you do? Or if you remember it, or what have you learned that you did?
I know I went to another door. It actually was a vacant apartment. Shot the lock on that door, kicked it in. Nothing there. I went to the next door. And there was actually a lady living there. I guess I had some dialogue with her as far as, you know, I want my dog back, and her saying, don't have your dog. Well, I wasn't listening to anything like that. You know, I'm going to find my dog, and that's it. And the door ain't going to stand in my way. And I did end up shooting the door itself. And, you know, I was trying to breach the door.
And according to the reports, you told her to step back. Why did you tell her that?
I really don't think I was out to hurt anybody. I mean, that wasn't my focus in my mind. I mean,
Were you thinking that what you were doing could cause the police to come, or were you even in that frame?
no, not at the time. Because I guess it wasn't shortly after that when the police did arrive.
Were you in Boise, Idaho? Did you know what you were doing? Were you consciously there? Or at any point did you realize what was going on, and did you have a thought that maybe this isn't the right thing to do or the right way to go about it?
Well, it wasn't until after when I shot the lock in that stairwell, and it was actually the report of the gunfire that was my first, you know, little mental look at questioning, you know, what are you doing? And it was, you know, basically asking yourself, you know, what is going on? I mean, you know, there's a big sense of confusion at the time as to where I was at, what I was doing.
So you weren't really aware?
Not at the time, no.
When were you aware that the police were there and that they were police?
I guess it wasn't until actually after I pointed the pistol at them and they shot back at me is when it finally started sinking in that, hey, those are police. This is Boise. And
Why'd you point the pistol at him?
well, at the time when they first came up, I wasn't clear in my own head who they were, and my pistol had a flashlight on it, so I was using that to put a light down the steps to try to identify who was down there. And
Because they were yelling and identifying themselves as police. Did you hear that?
not that I remember, no.
And what do you remember about them starting to fire at you?
Oh, I remember the wooden siding hitting my face as the bullets hit the wall next to me, and it was after that is when it was pretty much dawned on me, you know, this is not, you know, where it was established that in my head that this is not a threat, this is not